I inherited a cabin from my uncle last February. I never even knew he existed until the lawyer called. My entire childhood, nobody in my family ever mentioned Uncle Gerald's name. It was like he'd been erased. No photos, no stories, nothing. When I told my mom about the inheritance, she went completely pale. She didn't get angry or upset, just quiet. After a long pause, she said, "Sell it. Don't go there. Whatever you do, just list it sight unseen and move on." I asked her why, but she wouldn't explain. Just kept saying I shouldn't visit the property. I was in the middle of a messy divorce, drowning in legal fees. I needed to know what the cabin was worth before I could list it. So I convinced myself it would be quick. Drive up, take some photos for the realtor, maybe stay one night if necessary. Simple. The cabin sat on a frozen lake in northern Minnesota. The access road hadn't been plowed in weeks. I had to park and hike the final quarter-mile through knee-deep snow. By the time I reached the property, I was sweating under all my layers despite the freezing temperature. The place was smaller than expected. Weathered wood siding, crooked chimney. But when I stepped inside, I realized someone had been maintaining it. The floors were swept clean. The furniture, though old, showed no dust. Shelves held organized fishing gear and yellowed paperback novels from decades past. Then I noticed the hole in the floor. Right in the center of the main room was a perfectly circular opening, about 3 feet across. Through it, I could see dark water maybe 6 feet below. Metal reinforcement framed the edges. This was intentional, permanent. I'd heard about ice fishing cabins designed this way, but I'd never encountered one in person. The water sat completely still, like black glass. Exhausted, I decided to spend the night rather than navigate the unplowed road in darkness. I found a can of soup in the cupboard and ate it cold, then collapsed on the couch around 10 p.m. Around 3 a.m., a sound jerked me awake. It took me a moment to locate the source, the hole in the floor, a rhythmic tapping, or maybe scratching, persistent and deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and approached slowly, shining the beam down into the water. Nothing but impenetrable blackness stared back. The sound continued for another minute before stopping abruptly. I told myself it was natural, ice movement, thermal expansion. But my hands trembled as I dragged an old rug over the opening. The next morning, while exploring more thoroughly, I discovered a hidden panel behind some coats in the closet. When I pushed on it, it swung open to reveal stairs descending into darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I ignored them and went down. The basement was completely finished. Concrete walls, functional lighting, even a dehumidifier humming in the corner. Along one wall stood 4 tall metal filing cabinets, the industrial kind from old government offices. The first drawer was locked, but the mechanism was old. After a few minutes with a screwdriver, I jimmied it open. Inside were dozens of manila folders, each labeled with a name and date. Polaroid photographs, 8 or 9 of them. The first showed a young woman in her mid-20s standing outside the cabin, smiling in her winter coat. The second showed her inside, sitting on that same couch I'd slept on. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked uncomfortable. The third photo showed her near the hole in the floor. Her face was twisted in terror. And behind her, barely visible in the dim background, stood a figure. I couldn't make out the face. I opened another folder. Different person, same disturbing progression. Happy arrival, growing discomfort, final terror. Always with that shadowy figure lurking in the last shot. There were at least 50 folders. The dates stretched back to the early 80s, decades of this pattern. The most recent folder was dated September, 6 months ago. It showed a man in his 30s wearing a Columbia jacket with current styling. My uncle had died in July, 8 months prior, which meant someone else had been here recently. Someone else was continuing whatever this was. That's when I found the notebooks. 5 leather-bound journals filled with my uncle's handwriting sat on a nearby shelf. I grabbed the most recent one and flipped through it. Most entries were mundane: dates, times, weather observations, ice thickness measurements. Then I found something that made my stomach drop. The system works because of the isolation. People seek out remote places specifically to be alone. They don't tell others their exact location. Perfect conditions. Another entry from a few years back read, M suggested utilizing the hole more efficiently. He's correct. The lake is deep enough here that nothing surfaces. The ice hole design was ingenious. M, there was a partner, someone else involved, and based on that September folder, M was still active. I checked the property records on my phone. One other cabin existed on this lake, roughly a mile down the shoreline. Through the window, I could barely make it out through the trees. I stood there for maybe 10 minutes, paralyzed by indecision. If I called the police, my family name would be destroyed. But if I didn't, how many more people would disappear? I needed to know if this was still happening, if M was still out there. I stuffed the most recent notebook into my backpack and trudged through the snow toward the other cabin. I tried to stay within the tree line, keeping low. Through the window, I could see someone moving around inside. An older man, probably in his 60s, wearing a flannel shirt. He looked completely ordinary. He spotted me before I could back away. The door opened and he stepped out onto the porch. "You must be Gerald's nephew," he called out. His voice was warm and friendly. He was smiling. "Saw you arrive yesterday. Been wondering when you'd come by." "Just checking out the property," I managed. Of course. Beautiful spot, isn't it? Your uncle and I, we had an understanding about these lakes, about their particular advantages." The way he emphasized advantages made my skin prickle. "I should get going," I said, backing away slowly. "It's getting late." His smile didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Shame you have to leave so soon. We could talk about the family business. I'm sure you have questions." I turned and ran. His laughter echoed behind me through the trees. I made it back to the cabin, slammed the door, locked it. Every window, every lock. Then I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. I grabbed the notebooks, crammed them into my backpack. If I could just reach my car, I could call the police once I got reception. I moved toward the door. That's when I heard the footsteps on the porch, heavy boots on old wood. "You found the records?" His voice came through the door, eerily calm. "I knew you would. You're more perceptive than Gerald gave you credit for. That's good. We could use someone intelligent, someone who understands the importance of discretion." "I'm calling the police," I shouted back. He laughed. It wasn't mean or angry. That somehow made it worse. It was genuinely amused. "With what? There's no signal for miles out here. And your car? I blocked the road after you drove through yesterday. You're not leaving here." I scanned the cabin desperately. The windows were too small to climb through. The door was my only exit. Then my eyes fell on the hole in the floor. The rug had shifted during my basement search. I could see the dark water again. "Gerald kept you separate from this intentionally," he continued through the door. "Didn't want family involved. But circumstances have changed. You can understand what we've built here, or you can become part of the research." The door handle rattled. The old lock wouldn't hold much longer. I made my decision fast. Grabbed the kerosene lamp from the shelf by the door and the box of matches. Poured the kerosene over the notebooks and threw them down near the entrance. Struck a match. The notebooks went up immediately. The flame spread faster than I'd anticipated. "What are you doing?" His voice turned sharp, angry. I heard him throw himself against the door. Smoke filled the cabin rapidly. I yanked the rug completely off the hole in the floor and stared down at the black water. I took 3 deep breaths, trying to prepare myself. Then I jumped. The cold hit me like a physical blow, shocking every nerve in my body. But I forced my legs to kick, my arms to stroke. The water was murky and completely disorienting. I had no idea which direction led to shore. I just swam. praying I'd chosen correctly. My lungs burned. I needed air desperately. I kicked harder. I broke the surface about 50 feet from the cabin, gasping. The shock of cold air was almost as intense as the water. I could barely move, but I forced myself toward the shore. The lake was shallow near the edge. My feet found bottom, and I scrambled onto the ice. Through the smoke pouring from the cabin, I could see him standing on the porch. He wasn't fighting the fire. He was just watching, looking directly at me. Our eyes met for a brief second. Then I ran toward my car. I was hypothermic, shaking violently, could barely feel my legs, but somehow I made it. He'd blocked the road with his truck, but I drove through the ditch, tearing up my undercarriage. I drove 15 miles before I got cell signal, pulled over and called 911. I could barely speak through my frozen lips. The investigation took weeks. Divers recovered 7 sets of remains from beneath the ice near that cabin. 7 people in various states of preservation, kept intact by the frigid water. They never found M. His cabin was completely empty when they searched it. Cleaned out, no personal items. He vanished that night, and despite an extensive manhunt, he's never been located. There's still an active warrant, but it's been over a year now. I testified about what I found. The notebooks, the photos, all of it. My family's name got destroyed, just as I'd feared. Made national news. My mom hasn't spoken to me since. But here's what keeps me up at night. I burned those notebooks to save myself. They still got a conviction based on my testimony and the physical evidence. But M escaped. He's still out there somewhere. And those folders dated back decades, way longer than the 7 victims they recovered. I check my rearview mirror constantly now, and I never go near frozen lakes, ever. I spent 8 years as an EMT, from age 22 to 30. You see a lot of things in that job. The cases that stay with you are the ones you can't save. The ones where you arrive 3 minutes too late, make the wrong call, or simply can't change the outcome. There was one call when I was 26, car accident on a rural highway. By the time we got there, the driver was already gone. But here's the thing, if we'd been dispatched 5 minutes earlier, he might have made it. The delay was a system error, not anyone's fault technically, but that didn't change anything for him. I quit 2 years after that, couldn't carry that weight anymore. That's why I became a snowplow driver. It seemed like a way to help people without the constant life and death pressure. Just clear roads, keep things safe, go home. Simple. No more 3 a.m. emergency calls. I was wrong about it being simple. This happened last winter on Highway 287 in Montana, my regular route for 2 seasons. 60 miles of mountain highway. During storms, you can go hours without seeing another soul. Late January brought one of the season's worst storms. 3 feet of snow in 6 hours. Wind gusts hitting 60 miles per hour. Visibility dropped to maybe 20 feet. My supervisor Dave wanted to pull all the plows off the road. Too dangerous. But county officials insisted we keep at least one emergency route open. I drew that assignment. I was the only one out there. About 2 hours into my shift, somewhere near mile marker 45, I spotted someone on the shoulder. It took me a second to process what I was seeing. A person, standing there with his thumb out, hitchhiking, in a blizzard, at 1 a.m. He wore a heavy coat and boots, but no hat, no gloves. His hands were just hanging at his sides. I got close enough to see his face through the snow. He wasn't moving at all, wasn't waving, just standing there with his thumb out, staring straight ahead like a statue. Company policy is strict about passengers. No one allowed except emergency personnel. So I continued past. But the image stayed with me, the way he'd been standing so still. I made my pass north to the turnaround point, then headed back south. 20 minutes later, same spot. Mile marker 47. He was there again. Same exact position, same stance, thumb extended, not moving. This time I stopped. I couldn't just leave him out there. I opened the door. Wind and snow immediately filled the cab. "Hey!" I shouted over the storm. "You need help?" No response. No movement. That's when I noticed his lips. They were blue, deep blue, almost purple. "Hey!" I jumped down from the cab. My boots sank into deep snow. "Are you okay?" That's when he moved. He turned and ran into the trees. I stood there, completely confused. Then I climbed back into the cab and grabbed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got a possible exposure victim at mile marker 47. Individual fled into the woods. Appears severely hypothermic. Should I pursue or continue route?" Static crackled through the speaker. Then a voice responded. "Unit 7, continue route. We'll send someone." Something was wrong with that voice. Too flat, too emotionless. This wasn't Sam, our dispatcher for the past 3 years. This voice sounded mechanical. "Sam, is that you?" More static. "Continue route, Unit 7. I put the plow in gear and headed north again, but unease settled in my gut. The hitchhiker, the weird radio response, the complete absence of any other vehicles. At mile marker 50, I found the first vehicle. It was in the snowbank on the right side of the road. Only the rear bumper was visible. But here's what didn't make sense. The snow around it was fresh and light. If this car had been here since the storm started, it should have been completely buried. This was recent, very recent. I stopped and grabbed my flashlight, got out and pushed through the snow toward the car. It was a newer Honda Civic. I brushed snow off the driver's window. The keys were still in the ignition. I touched the hood, still warm. The door was locked. I looked inside with my flashlight. Personal belongings on the passenger seat, a purse, a phone sitting on the dashboard. "Dispatch, I've got an abandoned vehicle at mile marker 50. Recent model Honda, engine still warm, personal belongings inside. Requesting, Unit 7, continue route." "Sam, something's wrong here. This car was just..." "Continue route, Unit 7. I turned off the radio. My hands were shaking. That's when I saw the trail in the snow. Dark spots, barely visible, already being covered by fresh accumulation, leading from the driver's side door into the trees. I followed it, maybe 50 feet into the woods. The dark spots got bigger as I went. Then I realized what I was looking at. Blood. I stopped. Ahead of me in the darkness between the trees, I could see movement, shapes, more than one. Then I heard a voice, weak, calling from somewhere in the darkness. "Help me, please, help me." It was him, the hitchhiker. Every instinct told me to turn around, but I couldn't. 8 years as an EMT had conditioned me to run toward people asking for help. "Where are you?" I called, moving deeper into the trees. "Here. I'm hurt. Please." I found him slumped against a tree trunk. Same guy from the road. Up close, I could see he was in critical condition. Pale white skin, purple lips, blood soaking through his jacket. "What happened?" I knelt beside him. "They stage accidents," he managed weakly. "During storms like this, they target the drivers, take what they can. I was the last one. I managed to escape, but..." He looked down at his side where his jacket was completely saturated with blood. "Your dispatcher. They got to her. That's how they know where you are, when you're coming." My blood went cold. Sam, or whoever was pretending to be Sam on the radio. "How many of them are there?" "At least 4, maybe more. They have trucks with plows, snowmobiles. They'll be coming for you now. They know you found the car. They know you stopped." That's when I heard them. Engines roaring to life somewhere close by. Multiple engines. "Can you walk?" I asked. He shook his head weakly. "Go. Get help. Don't worry about... I'm not leaving you." I got him to his feet, supporting most of his weight. We started back toward the plow. The engines were getting louder. Through the trees, I could see headlights approaching from multiple directions. We made it to the plow and I practically threw him into the passenger seat. Jumped in, fired up the engine. The radio crackled immediately. "Unit 7, stop your vehicle immediately." I grabbed the radio. "Who is this? Where's Sam?" A different voice now, male, almost amused. "Sam's taking a break. You should have kept your head down, done your job. Now you've complicated things." I looked in my mirrors. 2 trucks appeared behind me, both equipped with plow blades, blocking the road back south. I cranked the wheel and headed north, pushing the plow as fast as it would go. "There's a roadblock at mile marker 55, the hitchhiker gasped next to me. His eyes were barely open. "They'll trap you there." "Then we don't take the highway." The trucks behind me were gaining ground, and ahead, more headlights appeared, forming a barrier. They were boxing me in. That's when I spotted it. A Forest Service road on the right. Barely visible through the storm, but there was a reflective sign marking it. I made a split-second decision and yanked the wheel hard right. The plow slid sideways. For a second, I thought we'd tip. Then the blade caught traction and we crashed through the snowbank onto the narrow road. Behind me, shouting, engines revving. They were following. The service road was completely unplowed. The snow was deep, maybe 3 feet, but the heavy plow blade gave me an advantage. I kept the accelerator floored. "Where does this lead?" I shouted at the hitchhiker. No response. I glanced over. His eyes were closed. "Hey, stay with me. Where does this go?" His eyes opened slowly. "Ranger station, 5 miles, but you won't make it. They know these woods." The trucks behind struggled with the deep snow. Their lighter plows were less effective. I was pulling ahead. Then a snowmobile appeared directly in front of me. It cut across the road, maybe 50 feet ahead. I saw the rider clearly in my headlights, ski mask, holding something long and flat, a spike strip. I had 2 seconds to decide. Brake and let the trucks catch us, or try something desperate. I chose desperate. Accelerated and cranked the wheel hard right, rammed the plow blade into the snowbank. The whole truck tilted violently. I thought we'd roll, but we crashed through small trees, the blade catching them and breaking them. I cut back left onto the road behind where the rider had deployed the spike strip. In my mirror, I saw him waving frantically, trying to warn the trucks. Too late. I heard the first truck hit the spikes, the sharp bang of tires blowing out, then a crash as it lost control. The second truck tried to brake but couldn't stop. It slammed into the first truck. "More will come," the hitchhiker mumbled. "They have more people." But ahead, through the snow, I could finally see lights. The ranger station. I didn't slow down. Drove straight through their gate into the parking lot, leaning on the horn the whole way. Rangers poured out of the building. I jumped out, started explaining about the trucks, about the hitchhiker, about everything. They called for medical evacuation immediately, but the storm was too severe. No helicopters could fly. We had to wait for an ambulance to drive up from the valley. It took 40 minutes. The hitchhiker died 15 minutes before it arrived. He was conscious almost until the end. Kept apologizing. Said he should have warned people sooner. Then he just stopped breathing. The Rangers had radioed for police backup. They caught 3 men trying to flee on snowmobiles about an hour later. Found Sam in a hunting cabin 2 miles away. She'd been missing for 2 days. They'd recorded hours of her voice, built up enough dispatcher phrases to fool anyone. The investigation uncovered 5 people who'd disappeared on Highway 287 over the previous 2 months. 5 people they'd targeted during storms. Found the remains in an old mine shaft 10 miles off the highway. 5 people I'd probably driven past in previous weeks, on my regular route, never knowing what was hidden in the trees just beyond the edge of the road. I still drive snowplow, same route actually, Highway 287. Someone has to do it. But I check every abandoned vehicle, follow every suspicious trail, and I never, ever ignore someone asking for help, because I was 3 minutes too late for that hitchhiker. Just like I'd been 3 minutes too late so many times before when I was an EMT. Some patterns never change. I took a maintenance job at a ski lodge in Vermont about a year ago. I'd left a bad situation back home and needed a fresh start. No savings, no references from previous employers. When I saw the online posting for a maintenance position with room and board included, I applied immediately. Didn't ask too many questions. The lodge was called White Ridge. It's this old Victorian mansion that got converted into a boutique ski resort. Really upscale place. The owner's name was Marcus Reed. He'd bought the property 8 months before I arrived and completely renovated it. On my first day, he gave me a comprehensive tour. Showed me all the guest rooms, the restaurant, everything. Then he opened a door off the main kitchen. "This leads to the basement," he explained. "Staff quarters, storage, all the maintenance systems. Your room is down there." The basement was surprisingly modern. Fresh paint, contemporary LED lighting, sealed concrete floors. My room was small but comfortable. Private bathroom, decent bed. Better than many places I'd lived. "I renovated the entire basement when I bought the property," Marcus told me. "I believe staff deserve proper accommodations." He was right. I was comfortable. For the first 2 weeks, everything seemed perfect. The work was straightforward. Fix a leaky faucet here, replace a light bulb there. The pay matched what he'd promised. Marcus was friendly but professional. The other staff members were all pleasant. Then I had to fix a toilet on the second floor. It was Saturday night, technically my day off, but one of the guest toilets wouldn't stop running. There's a maintenance corridor that runs behind all the guest rooms. I'd been back there dozens of times. But this time, walking down the corridor with my toolbox, I noticed something I'd never seen before. A door at the very end. It was painted the exact same color as the walls. Same texture too, almost completely invisible. But once I spotted it, I couldn't unsee it. The door had a keypad lock. Curiosity got the better of me. I tried the handle, locked, obviously. But something about that door bothered me deeply. I fixed the toilet and went back downstairs, but I couldn't stop thinking about that door. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to the basement's layout. I'd walk the corridors, counting my steps, trying to match them up with the dimensions of the building above. That's when I realized something didn't add up. Based on the size of the building, there should have been significantly more space. There were rooms back there not shown on any of the plans Marcus had given me. I tried dismissing it, probably just old storage areas. But then I started noticing other things. The soundproofing in the basement walls was excessive, professional-grade acoustic panels, way more than you'd need for a ski lodge. And sometimes late at night I'd hear sounds, muffled thumping like furniture being moved. 3 weeks into the job, I was replacing a corroded section of water pipe near my room. I tapped the wall with my wrench and heard something unexpected, a hollow sound. I knocked in a different spot, solid. Knocked where I'd heard the hollow sound, definitely hollow. I ran my fingers carefully along the wall until I found it, a nearly invisible seam. I should have stopped there, but I didn't. I removed the panel. Behind it was a narrow passage, maybe 2 feet wide. I grabbed my flashlight and squeezed through. The passage extended about 30 feet before opening into a small space with a steel door. This door wasn't locked, just secured with a simple latch on the outside. I opened it. The room measured roughly 10 feet by 10 feet. A cot in one corner, a bucket in the opposite corner. Nothing else. The walls had soundproofing installed, and mounted in the upper corner was a small camera. The red recording light was glowing steadily. The cot showed recent use. I could see the impression of a body on the thin mattress. My hands started shaking. I backed out into the passage and stood there for a minute. Then I opened the next door. Same layout, cot, bucket, camera, soundproofing. But this room wasn't empty. There was a woman sitting on the cot. She looked maybe 30 years old, extremely thin, pale, wearing a stained nightgown. When she saw me, her eyes went wide with terror. She opened her mouth as if to scream, but no sound came out. "It's okay," I whispered, raising my hands. "I didn't know anyone was down here. I'm not part of whatever this is." She just stared at me, shaking her head violently. "I'm going to get you out," I said quietly. "Just stay quiet. Let me check if there are others." Footsteps, directly above me. Marcus's office was right overhead. I closed the door as silently as possible and hurried back through the passage, replaced the access panel. My heart was hammering. I went to my room and grabbed my phone. I needed to call the police, but I also needed evidence. I was heading back toward the passage when I heard my name. "Everything all right down here?" Marcus's voice. I turned to find him standing at the bottom of the stairs. "Thought I heard some unusual sounds." "Just replacing that corroded pipe section," I managed. "Almost finished." He smiled, the same professional smile I'd seen for 3 weeks, but his eyes were different now. "Good. Actually, I wanted to discuss something with you. Would you mind coming up to my office?" Every instinct screamed at me to refuse, but if I ran now, he'd know I'd discovered something. So I followed him upstairs. His office was elegant, dark wood paneling, leather furniture. He gestured for me to sit. "You've been doing exceptional work," he began. "I'm very impressed. But I've noticed you've been curious lately about the basement layout, about certain restricted areas." My stomach dropped. "I'm a very particular person," he continued, his voice eerily calm. "I have particular interests. The basement renovations weren't solely about improving staff accommodations. They were about creating space for research, a behavioral study, human psychological responses under specific conditions, isolation. It's fascinating work. You're keeping people down there, temporarily housing select individuals for study purposes," he corrected smoothly. "People who won't be missed, no families checking on them, runaways, drifters." He paused deliberately. "People like you, actually." I started to stand. He didn't move. "That's precisely why I hired you," he continued. "When I reviewed your application, you fit the profile perfectly. Your background, your situation. No one knows you're here. When I saw your information, I thought you'd be ideal, either for staff or," he smiled, "for the study itself. The police won't believe you." He stood now, walked casually to the window. "You're a person with a troubled history who's been here 3 weeks. I'm a respected businessman with impeccable credentials. Who do you think law enforcement will believe?" He turned back to face me. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to return to your room. Think about your situation. In the morning, we'll speak again, and you'll decide whether you want to continue working here, receiving excellent compensation, or whether you want to join the study." I ran. Didn't think. Just turned and bolted. Down the stairs, through the kitchen, back to the basement. Got to my room and grabbed everything: phone, keys, jacket. The basement exit at the end of the corridor was locked. Electronic lock. I didn't have the code. I tried the emergency exit, also locked. Footsteps on the stairs. Marcus. And he wasn't alone. "I genuinely hoped we could reach an understanding," Marcus called out. I looked around frantically. The access panel. I pulled it open and squeezed into the passage, ran toward the hidden rooms. If I couldn't escape, I'd at least free whoever was being held. First door, empty. Second door, also empty. Third door. There was a man sitting on the cot, maybe 40 years old. He looked up when I opened the door. His eyes were hollow. "Run," he whispered. "He's coming." I grabbed his arm, pulled him to his feet. "Come on." The fire alarm erupted, loud, piercing. Marcus's voice came over the intercom system. "All guests and staff, please evacuate the building immediately. This is not a drill." There was a click. The electronic locks released. The fire alarm must have triggered the emergency protocols. I didn't question it. I grabbed the man's arm and we ran. Other doors were opening throughout the basement, staff members emerging, confused. Behind us, 2 more people stumbled out of the hidden passage. Both wore the same stained nightgowns. Both looked terrified. We made it up the stairs and outside into the snow. Guests were pouring from the main building. Fire trucks were already approaching. I spotted a police officer who'd arrived with the fire trucks. I ran to him and started talking fast. The other people from those rooms gathered around me, supporting everything I said. More police arrived. They searched the entire lodge, found the hidden passage, found the rooms with the cots and cameras, found filing cabinets full of records, photos, videos, written observations documenting everything. But they didn't find Marcus. He'd vanished in the evacuation chaos. Despite an extensive manhunt, state police, FBI, everyone searching, he's never been located. It's been over a year now. They recovered 3 people that night, but Marcus's files suggested there had been others before them. The dates showed gaps. Those earlier people are still missing. I testified at all the hearings, tried to rebuild my life. These days I check every basement I enter. You'd be surprised what people hide in the spaces beneath buildings. And I never take a job without thoroughly researching the employer first. Some risks are too great, even when you're desperate.